So today we are going to talk about leveraging state assessment IBDs to improve instruction. And so what some of us as consultants are seeing across the state is that we have all of this great data and we're not sure how to take actionable steps forward to make sure that teachers know what those IBDs mean, what information it's processing back to us, and then what to even do with it. So as we jump in, my name is Rebecca Kessler. I'm our lead special education consultant with Step Up. I consult in a lot of different areas across the state, so I get to see a lot of really fun, cool people. So I've taught a little bit of everything, but our focus for today is really more on that state assessment data. So some things that I've noticed, and our other consultants that are on the call can jump into, as we've done this work, there's a lot of anxiety for our teachers around data and what our data means and what our data says. So we're going to touch just really briefly on how to reduce the anxiety around those data conversations. And then how we can set up IBD reports for analysis with teachers. So we really want teachers to have that aha moment, the big light bulb around what is it saying? Why is it saying that? And so sometimes we do a lot of that work for our teachers because we want to save them time, but helping them do the process so that they can really get the most out of it is really beneficial. We'll touch on some root cause analysis. So we won't have time to go into all the things that we kind of discuss and talk about, but we'll have some voice and choice on the call. And then lastly, thinking through how we action plan for effective change. So integrating those proficiency skills, making sure that we're using those to align with our IBDs to change for effective assessment, or how that trickles into our tier 1 instruction. So firstly, this is a really short activity called meaning making. So it's giving some sort of visual and having people adapt a story or an idea or a few words about what may or may not be happening in this photo. So if you want to throw it in the chat or if you want to come off mute, I'm going to show you a picture. I want you to think, what emotions does it evoke? What story does your brain tell yourself? So if it's easier in the chat or if you want to come off mute, what might be happening in this picture? What emotions does it evoke for you? Fun time making cookies. Thank you, Sue.
Just memories, making memories with family.
Oh, Lindsay, thank you. Mother-daughter baking together, joy. So the interesting one, like mother-daughter baking together, that is a lot of assumptions. Like we think through like, oh, baking with my grandma or baking with my mom, or you have this connection, this kind of visceral reaction. And so our brains naturally do that as a way to make sense of the world around us. So this could very easily be a foster child or a niece or a little cousin, or we don't know if it's for a birthday party or we don't know why it's happening, but we have some of these things that kind of fill in the gaps. And all of that is based on cultural things that we've experienced, past experiences, but the same is true with data. So having conversations with teachers that that's a natural, normal process. When we see data, we start to fill in based on those past experiences. So I've told a story fairly often that one of my first teaching jobs, I had an administrator that said, your job is to get all your kids to proficient and you're against the teacher next door. So they're doing it too, but I think you're a better teacher. So you do that. And that's the way that you'll know if you're a good teacher. And so every time I got data back that didn't show 100% proficient kids, I was like, I must be a terrible teacher. And I felt all this pressure because of my experiences and what people had told me. So my brain filled in this narrative that likely was not true. And our teachers do that too. I skipped and I just talked all the way through it. So it really goes back to our beliefs, our past experiences, and our cultural understandings. So something that I've noticed as I'm working with teachers, and Sarah and Sue and Shauna, you guys can jump in here too. Something that I've noticed is that our teachers don't know what all the different item types are. They don't know what the words, like the little characters mean for the abbreviations, and that's okay because that's not where they spend the most of their time. But Desi has a really helpful PDF that just goes through, these are the choices, these are some samples of what it could look like. Teachers can start to think through specifically for tech enhanced items. They're like, well, it's tech enhanced and they're going to do text highlight. How could I mimic that in my classroom to allow kids to have more practice in that style? So whenever I've been working with teachers in districts, I give them what the list is. They have these examples in the DESI document so that they know kind of what we're looking for whenever we actually get into the IBDs. Because that's the hard thing too, is we give them the data, they're looking and they're like, I don't know what this means. And then they can turn off before they've had a chance to really dig in. So the first thing that we do, and we're going to take a look at some sample data in just a second, is that IBD report has more information than what they need. It has some of like the item descriptor analysis and it has the item codes, and they don't need any of that. So what we want to do is we want to be focusing on those priority standards because we know that DESI is shifting to that 80 to 90% of the assessment is the priorities. This specific one we're going to look at today is about 77% of the priority standards. We're also going to take a look at those item types. So this is kind of a section that we want to keep and really zone in on. And then we can use some of that conditional formatting or color coding to take all of our average points or our percents, and we can see where some of the breakdowns are. So we're going to switch over here. Hopefully everyone can see that just all right. Okay, so this is an actual IBD report. I've taken all the school demographic information off so that we can't see any of that, but what I've got is third through eighth grade math. I've done some color coding already, but I have lots and lots and lots of columns. So when you're working with your teachers, what we can do is I can just click a column with the drop down and I can click hide. So if I don't need a particular column, I don't need the points possible, so I can hide that. The percentage points earned or the average points earned, either of those are really helpful. I'm just going to keep one of those. So I'm going to get rid of total number of students, average points, points earned. I'm just going to hide those. We don't want to delete anything. I don't need the item ID because that's not information for me anyway. So now I'm a little bit more nuanced down to just what I'm going to be referencing. And then let's say that we're working with a fifth grade teacher. We can make a copy of the file for them or however it works best for you in your district. But I can hide grades 1 through 4 and I can isolate down just to my fifth grade standards. So now I have my fifth grade report of my IBDs to talk through with teachers. Then what we can do is I'm just going to highlight priority standards and do format conditional formatting. I want it to say text is exactly and the word yes. If it's a yes, it's going to highlight it green, and that tells me that we can focus on those priority standards. Then I also want to do something similar for the percentage points. This one's totally optional. But for here, I want to do if it is less than 50, so less than 50% of my kids, I'm going to highlight it red. And then I can do another one even. So I could say I want it to be between. So it's between 51 and let's do 70. And let's do that one yellow. So now I've got some helpful color coding that can tell me like, okay, well, these are some regions that we might want to look at. So I'm just going to take one. We're going to do 5DSA2. So we're looking at these 3 rows. I see, yes, this is a priority standard. I can see the item type here and the subtype, and then I see our percentile points earned. So for a teacher, what we might want to lead them through is, well, I see 2 of these are yellow and 1 of them is red. Why might that be happening? Why might one be red and the other 2 are yellow? If it's the same standard, it's the same description, that seems odd that I've got a little around 50%, almost 60%, and then it tinks down to like below 30%. So what then I can start looking to, as I can see, is that affected by the item type. So I'm just making hypothesis about what might be happening. So I've got multiple choice. Okay, they did okay. Tech enhanced LP means line plot. They did pretty well. We get to tech enhanced coordinate grid. Well, that's the one they bombed. So it seems like my kids fairly well understand the content as evidenced by here, but not the context of this 27%, which probably means that my students understand line plots, but not that a line plot or a horizontal line plot is the same as the x-axis on a coordinate grid. So then for my math instruction, I can start having better conversations in that tier 1 time of like, hey, if we just take your line plot and overlay it with the coordinate grid, but I'm just making those hypotheses about why that might be true. So as teachers work with their data like this, we can start to isolate, do you want them to focus on priority standards? Do you want your percentile points? It's all going to depend on your district. Do you want them to target ones that are really close to a break point? Like you want them to get to 70% or 60%? Do you want those ones that are really close? Or do you want the ones where like, well, if I just connect this dot for kids, this one's going to shoot up to like 50 or 60%. So it depends on what your needs are, and that's really individualized by your teachers and your students in your school. So that's some of that color coding work. You can do that ahead of time for your teachers, and then they can just do the analysis part. So then get this back up. Here we go. So then what we would do is some sort of root cause analysis. And so as we've done this work, these seem to be the ones that are most commonly true. And so with teachers, I've been trying to tell them that we're making a hypothesis. You might be wrong, and that's okay. But the ones that we see most often is misalignment between your instruction and assessment questions compared to sample questions in the MAT tools. So digging into those proficiency scales, knowing what the state says that proficiency and rigor look like, that there's some sort of misalignment. Two is lack of student familiarity with question types. So that's one where we see where there's like high, high, low. That one's pretty common for that. Gaps in prerequisite knowledge or skills, so good vertical conversations using our vertical progressions. Maybe there's an instructional pacing issue, so it's either too fast, not enough depth, takes too long for something else. We can kind of gift time from one standard to another. And then inconsistent or unclear success criteria, and that's for student knowledge. So what I would like to do, so this is a little bit more reflective of your desires and needs, in the chat, if you want to vote on just one of these, we have time probably to go through one and talk through what might be happening and some of the solutions that we can find. I've got Sue's vote. Gaps, okay. So gaps in prerequisite knowledge or skills. Okay. So what we can do, I'm going to fast forward through these ones. Okay. So gaps in prerequisite knowledge or skills, we can use those vertical progressions to start thinking back to like, this is the standard at my grade level. So this is what I need them to achieve. Where is that previous learning coming from? And how deep do we go at those other learning levels? What that can turn into, and we don't want that to be, is we're having vertical conversations where the fifth grade team is blaming the fourth grade team who's blaming the third grade team, because that's not helpful and that's not what we need. So instead, we're really targeting down to if the standard says, like in this example, add and subtract multi-digit whole numbers and decimals to the thousands place and justify the solution. Where is that coming from and where does that build from? What should I expect my kids who are coming from fourth grade to know? So then instead of getting to that unit where we're doing numbers base 10, and like I haven't done any review or spiraling to get ready for that content, I can look back and see, okay, these are skills that I can pre-assess. I can see who has this, who doesn't. And then during my math centers or math rotation time, or during, if you're teaching middle school, during like your daily warm-up, we can start doing some of those prerequisite skills that we need to unlock for the next level of learning. I can also think through, and we can dig into like our MAT tools to think through how am I going to scaffold instruction to support them getting to the standard at that fifth grade level. So we can use that. And so one teacher I saw, she did a really great job. She had noticed that there was a gap from what she was teaching. I think she taught fifth grade. She was like, oh, they haven't seen any related content since second grade in this type of area. So it's almost brand new for them. So for her, she started building an instructional time, and it was like 2 to 3 minutes a day. It was just like a daily question that they did that built in that previous instruction from K2 that looped up to fourth or fifth grade where she was. So thinking through how do we compare where they are versus where we need them to be. Okay, and then the last thing is really thinking through our action plan and what we're going to use to be effective moving forward. So the teachers that I've worked with have selected about 5 standards that's on that IBD report, and I encourage them to select 5 standards that are across the school year. So I don't want everything that's going to show up in November because that's going to be overwhelming. I want something in maybe unit 2, and then one that's in unit 3, and then maybe another unit 4. So we're making those incremental shifts that are possible for us to navigate. So we're going to take those root cause analysis that we had and start thinking through, do those root causes impact my instruction, my assessment, or both? So do I need to do some tier 2 support? Do I need to repaste something? Maybe if I've never, like the data one that I showed earlier, if I've never told kids that the horizontal line is the x-axis on a graph, I'm going to need to make a note. So when I get to that unit, I'm going to remember to myself and say, oh, right, that's what I forgot to fill in. So we can start making some of those plans here. And then the other side is helping your teacher set a timeline for when those things need to be completed. So if they have, these are all the things I need to do, but when does that show up in my CMT? What unit does that come with? Is that a standard that's spiraled over time? And setting what needs to be completed. So in this timeline, if this is in unit 3, I need to make this instructional adjustment. We need to update some of our quizzes or formative assessments. I need all that done by the time I start unit 3 so that I'm prepared and I know the end goal. So hopefully that was short and sweet. But with your teachers, the most impactful thing is they open up that IBD. We're going to locate if they are priority standards or not. Let's focus and see, are there similarities or glaring differences that's going to give us some of those root causes? And then making sure that we have a really detailed action plan to change that assessment. We're not going to teach the book as usual. We're going to dive into the MAT tools and make sure we understand proficiency, locate the timeline on our CMTs, and then make a plan to move forward. So hopefully this was short and sweet and helpful for you today. And thank you all for joining. If you have any questions, you can drop them in the chat.
Can I just add one thing, Rebecca?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, what I was thinking about when you showed the gap analysis and you were talking about we would want to do some pre-assessing or pre-testing to see what was missing. It made me think if we're talking grades 3 through 8, those newly released Missouri instructional testlets that are already aligned to the standards, the priority standards, would be great to pull parts of those in PDF form and use those because we know those are vetted, right? We know those are aligned to the standards. So that would be an easy way to do that. Um, so yeah, thank you. I learned a lot today.
Those testlets are really helpful. That's the other thing. Shauna talks a lot about the Numo Leap blocks. I've started helping some teachers find, like, okay, if that's that standard, let's go see if we can find it in the Mo Leaps and see what we might be missing. Sarah, Shauna, anything else to add?
No, I think it was great. I personally appreciated, as a former principal, even just the simplicity of you breaking down how to sort that spreadsheet, the best way to do that proactive work. And of course, I just appreciate how you showed our people using our tool, how easy it could be to integrate those. So great job.
Thank you,
Anyone else on the
Rebecca.
call?
Very informative. I think this is going to really be helpful for a lot of our schools.
Okay, well, thank you all for being here today, and that wraps up our time.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you all.